What's up everybody, and welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Johners. This is episode 42 and welcome to this week's show. We've got a lot to cover this week. We've got the Money in the Bank preview, or my predictions, which will be towards the end of the episode, so stay tuned for that. We're going to be talking about the Tom Mcgee and Bret Hart match and Holy Grail documentary that aired this week on the WWE Network, of course. Lots to say about that. We're going to be talking about the AEW contract with TNT and the repercussions that might have on WWE. We're going to be looking at the new WWE contract where BT Sport appear to be getting involved, and of course we'll be covering this week's NXT and NXT UK. But before all of that, just want to throw out some plugs like I do on a weekly basis, just so that you know where to reach out to us. On Twitter, of course, you can reach out to us on Twitter, twitter.com/withjohners_pod. That's at withjohners_pod if you want to reach out to us on Twitter. We're on Instagram, instagram.com/wrestlingwithjohners. You can search for our Facebook group, our ever interactive, fun and engaging Facebook group. Go onto Facebook, search Wrestling with Johners, that's JOHNERS, and so go and reach out to us on social media, join in on all the fun there. And of course, you're obviously listening to us on one podcast platform or another, but just to let you know that you can reach out to us, you can listen to this podcast on all major podcast channels, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, Podcast Addict, Anchor, Castbox, Stitcher Radio, YouTube, literally wherever you get your podcasts, we are there. And don't forget, if you're listening on Apple iTunes, to give us a 5-star review, leave us some comments, and if you do, I'll be happy to give you a shout out on a future episode. So, on with some of the news. AEW, we know next Saturday, it's going to be its first pay-per-view, its first official show. It's not just a t-shirt company, ladies and gentlemen. It is going to be a proper wrestling organisation. We obviously saw All In, which was a collection of indie star and indie talent from around the world, do that awesome show in Chicago last September. They obviously affiliated and joined started the AEW brand at the beginning of January. And we've been waiting for news on everything from the announcement of Double or Nothing, which is taking place next weekend in Las Vegas, of course, through to how we'll be able to see the pay-per-view, where we'll be able to see the TV show when it launches later on this year in October. Well, the news has dropped, and AEW will be on TNT in the States, so back on the Turner network. And TNT, remember, used to be the home of WCW more than 18 years ago now, before WCW of course went under and got purchased for what it was worth by the WWF at the time. But some of you may not be aware that TNT is one of the major cable providers in the whole of the United States, and it can pull in as many viewers as the USA Network, which currently houses Raw every Monday, of course. We know that come October, SmackDown will be going to Fox, and Raw will be staying on USA Network, but it will be the start of two massive TV deals for the WWE there. But TNT, it can pull in as many viewers as USA Network, and could be a legitimate draw for many wrestling fans who have fallen out of love with the WWE product over the last few years. I can honestly see AEW pulling in more viewers than the WWE in its first few weeks, certainly, especially if the product is great, and I'm sure it's going to be. AEW does promise a more sports-based wrestling show where wins and losses do matter, where they'll be using some kind of win-loss rating system to see who deserves title shots and other opportunities. AEW has a definitely is boasting a fantastic roster of high-profile names such as the Young Bucks, Chris Jericho, of course, Hangman Page, Pac, Jimmy Havoc, Cody Rhodes, Dustin Rhodes, SCU, Kenny Omega, to name but a few. And AEW is a place to be fully inclusive. However, I do hope that AEW doesn't take themselves too seriously. Now, in a recent statement, the CEO Tony Khan put out a message out there, and I shall read Tony Khan's statement. He is the CEO of AEW. He said in a recent press release, AEW is answering the call. AEW is more than wrestling. It's about a movement fueled by wrestling fans who have been undeserved and perhaps even disappointed by what the industry has produced in recent years. And yes, you can clearly tell by that statement, and we all know that AEW is definitely filling a massive gap, possibly the gap that WCW left all them years ago. You've got a lot of disenfranchised wrestling fans that have never kind of really embraced the WWE product since WCW went under, want some more kind of realistic, edgy product. Since the WWE have gone more PG, a lot of people have not enjoyed the product, especially the John Cena era. It's had its fun characters, edgy moments, cool moments, especially with CM Punk, for example. Been one of the characters that stand out and tried to make it quite a bit more edgy, but AEW, it doesn't want to take itself too seriously. Remember that this is still a pro wrestling product. It's still a pro wrestling company, and there has to be an element of entertainment. I'm sure there will be, and of course you've seen Being the Elite and Road to Double or Nothing, which is not only great storytelling, fantastic a drama in some sense, especially that promo that Cody Rhodes gave a few weeks ago, leading us to his match with his brother Dustin Rhodes and getting us all excited for Double or Nothing. We know that Being the Elite is highly entertaining, but at the same time they don't want to be too sports based. They don't want to go too far the other way. They want to have that fun, that entertainment, the storylines that are going to keep the casual wrestling fan interested and maybe attract a larger audience. They won't maintain high viewing figures on excellent matches alone, and that's going to work for some people. And I can see their viewing figures certainly for the first few weeks, possibly first few months, be pretty up there. I mean, you look at Raw and SmackDown; they're only drawing maybe 2 million viewers, slightly over, slightly less. Some weeks, in some cases. Some weeks, and I can see AEW with the buzz. Now, the buzz regarding AEW has been something that I've not seen possibly for forever, in terms of a new promotion, a new wrestling organisation coming on the scene. I mean, when was the last time you felt this amount of buzz from a new sports team, for example, or a new TV show, for example? But a new wrestling company coming on the scene, of course, it's given itself time to create that buzz, to create its roster, to create the drama, to build the matches, to build Double or Nothing. And I think everything's been planned and executed perfectly so far. But yes, it doesn't want to take itself too seriously. It doesn't want to go too far the other way. It does want to remember that it's still an entertainment brand, and it's got to keep that fun and the storylines and that interest there for the casual viewers. You will still maintain a certain audience for pure wrestling, and yes, there are going to be people that are going to be tuning in for the excellent action, but there are going to be the audience members who are going to want to see what they are more familiar with regarding the wrestling products, especially if you're trying to attract a WWE viewer and trying to pull the WWE viewer away from that product and get them to view AEW. You want to have that fun, you want to have that entertainment. You don't want it to be comedy. You don't want it to be too much the other way, where it's just turning into silly storylines like we're currently seeing on Raw each week. But I, for one, cannot wait to see Double or Nothing. I, for one, can't wait to see AEW, and I can't wait to see what they produce next Saturday and what they produce on their weekly show come October. And of course, as announced last week, another bombshell that dropped last week is that Double or Nothing will be available on ITV Box Office. It will be preceded by a 1 hour pre-show on ITV4, and it looks as though ITV and ITV4 might be in negotiations, so might be a partner with AEW, possibly when it starts its weekly TV show in October. That's yet to be confirmed, but we do know for a fact that not only will TNT be its weekly provider for the TV show when it launches in October, but ITV4, ITV Box Office will be showing Double or Nothing and the pre-show next Saturday night as well, so that accommodates the UK viewer. But we will have to see whether ITV or ITV4 are going to be the partner for AEW, a UK TV distributor in the future. Be great if it is. Now, of course, ITV has got a really strong history with wrestling. We all know the World of Sport days back in the 70s, in the 80s. And yes, I remember Dickie Davis and that hair and that moustache. Introducing the World of Sports and the weekly wrestling that would take part in that. Of course, that only lasted till about 1987 or 88, and then of course ITV started showing American wrestling. But more recently, 2017, there was that one-off New Year's Eve World of Sport special, and of course last summer for 10 weeks ITV showed a Saturday afternoon 1-hour presentation of World of Sports, which was very watered down, very much aimed for a family audience. And yes, it wasn't really for the kind of hardcore wrestling fan, but it was good for what it was. Had a lot of popular names, not just on the indie circuit, but it did attract some names from around the world as well that helped out that show every Saturday afternoon. But like I say, it was very watered down. It was heavily edited, more for a TV audience. But I would love ITV to be involved. And ITV4, it's a channel that's aimed for more the kind of younger audience, maybe 18 to 30 sort of audience, where it's got slightly more edgier shows, not your typical ITV Coronation Street audience, let me tell you. But it's a TV channel that doesn't get huge ratings. I think its average ratings or highest ratings for some of its more popular shows is around about the 150,000 to 250,000 viewer mark. And of course it does attract that slightly younger demographic in viewing audiences. And that could be perfect for AEW. That could be the audience that it's looking to attract. It could be the perfect channel for AEW. And if it's shown at a reasonable time, hopefully they won't air it live, but if they show it, the following day at 9 or 10 o'clock in the evening, that would be a perfect time slot for that sort of channel, for that sort of show. And yeah, we'll have to see. But as soon as we hear anything more on that, we will let you know. But speaking of AEW, on next week's episode, dropping around Thursday or Friday, we will do a full rundown of AEW's Double or Nothing card, all the matches that you will see next Saturday night, and might get one or two guests along to help preview that show. And then of course we'll be reviewing Double or Nothing the following week. It'll be myself and two wrestling buddies of mine, Chris Thornton and Ash Crawford, who will be dropping on the podcast, do a special Double or Nothing review with myself, and that will be a few days after the show takes place, so possibly the Monday or the Tuesday. I'm definitely looking forward to previewing Double or Nothing on next week's show and reviewing the show the following week. Then we've got WWE's TV contract with Sky, which is coming to an end. Now, I'm not entirely sure when it's coming to an end, but I know they signed a 5-year deal in 2014, but they signed a 5-year deal in 2014 before the network was a thing, before the WWE network was a thing, before it's so popular. And of course, at the time, Sky was showing all of the WWE box office pay-per-views on their box office, of course, and that was the only way to see the pay-per-views, really, unless you did it by illegal means. But before the network came along, WWE would screen all of the WWE pay-per-views on their box office at around, I think it was about $14.99, possibly $15.99, $19.99 for WrestleManias. And then, of course, the network came along. And now I seem to remember the network launching at the beginning of 2014 in America. But I think we didn't get it in the UK until, I remember seeing WrestleMania 30, which took place at the beginning of April 2014 on the WWE network. I do remember seeing it on the network. So the UK must have had the network a few months after the US. But the Sky contract was signed around kind of early to mid 2014. It was a 5-year deal that's coming to an end, and of course, with the Sky contract coming into an end, that also draws an end to their 30-year partnership, their 30-year relationship. Sky has been showing WWE since 1989, and I remember seeing WWE in the early 90s, but looking back, you've got to look at, for example, some of the late 80s stuff on WWE, airing on Sky Movies in some cases, Sky One, before moving to Sky Sports. And it's had a fantastic, glowing relationship with Sky, but nowadays, you can kind of understand why the relationship has fallen through, because with the introduction of the network, everybody can see the pay-per-views on the WWE network. Viewing figures in the States for Raw and SmackDown have dropped off, and of course when we air Raw and SmackDown live, it's like 1 a.m. through till 4 in the morning in some cases, and you're only going to get, thousands of people, probably not even to the tens of thousands, watching it live at that time in the morning. A lot of people record it and see it the following day, but then with the kind of massive interest dropping off in Raw and SmackDown because of the quality of the product, which we have spoken about at great length here on the podcast. You've not only got the pay-per-view numbers dropping off because of the network, you've got the casual audience who would watch Raw and SmackDown on Sky dropping off because of timings, because the product isn't that great. So the numbers are not only dwindling in the States, but they're dwindling in the UK. What can BT Sports bring to this? BT Sports are going to be the new provider of WWE. We will have to see. But it'll be interesting to see how BT Sports can promote WWE a little bit more. You also have to remember that to be able to view WWE on Sky, you're talking about £20+ to watch it on Sky Sports. Now I think it's on like Sky Sports 3, and that is kind of like a bolt-on package to the regular Sky Sports package. So you have to pay £20+ just for the Sky Sports package to be able to see to see the WWE product, Raw and SmackDown, ordinarily anyway. And that's on top of maybe another £20+ package. You're talking £40 to £50 to have the Sky package, and then to see Sky Sports, to be able to see the WWE product every single month. That's quite expensive. Now, BT Sports, I believe, is available to Virgin Media customers, so I believe it's a lot more obtainable. I'm not going to say that the viewing figures or the amount of people that have Virgin Media compared to Sky is going to be that much greater, but it could certainly be a selling point for BT Sports to get more people on board if the WWE are going to be showing through them. But I can also see a lot of Sky and Sky Sports subscriptions in particular drop off, because I think there's a lot of wrestling fans that only have Sky Sports for WWE. Yeah, very interesting times for TV within the wrestling product. Certainly, we've spoken about AEW. We've spoken about Fox at great length on this podcast, coming in with the multi-billion-dollar deal that kicks in with Fox and the WWE in October. And that'll be interesting to see how that kind of develops between those two. Fox certainly won't put up with low viewing figures and will certainly demand more of a sports-based product. So with the competition of AEW and the demands of Fox, I think that this is possibly a bit of a wake-up call for WWE, and it will be fantastic to see how the product as a whole, how the sport as a whole, with AEW and WWE develops and improves and progresses through the remainder of 2019. Earlier on this week, I saw the Bret Hart and Tom Mcgee Holy Grail documentary, and of course it documented this infamous missing tape, this infamous missing wrestling match that was kind of like urban folklore, this mythology story that was out there amongst tape traders and wrestling fans about this wrestling match that Bret Hart took part in in 1986 against Tom Mcgee, who nobody really knows much about, and certainly nobody knew much about back then, but is kind of this story has built up over the years about Bret Hart and Tom Mcgee, and more importantly about Vince McMahon being so enamoured with Tom Mcgee, and that he was going to be the next big thing, and there was this match out there that pretty much had Vince McMahon salivating, and was ready to turn this guy into the next Hulk Hogan, the next big WWF superstar, the next world champion. If you didn't see it, I definitely recommend you go out and watch it. The whole thing is about 45 minutes. It's not only a documentary that, and I'll talk more about it in a second, but it shows the match, the one from 1986 between Tom Mcgee and Bret Hart, towards the end of the documentary, and the whole package. It's a fantastic presentation from WWE, and a great exclusive for the network. Definitely go out of your way to watch this. The match itself is pretty good. I love the whole thing. The match was never aired, of course, but it did have some commentary over the match by Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby the Brain Heenan, despite the fact the match never aired. Now remember that this match took place in 1986, so Bret Hart was more well known back then in the WWF for being a tag team wrestler as part of the Hart Foundation, who were heels at the time, along with their manager, the Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart. Mcgee did really well in this match, showing a lot of agility, a lot of pace, a lot of power, and certainly he didn't come across as your typical musclehead 1980s WWF wrestler in this match. Mcgee had a fantastic look. He was around 6'4", 6'5", weighing around 265, 275 pounds. He looked amazing. He looks like an Adonis in the ring. He was young, athletic, amazing look. And he did really well to get the win over Bret Hart in this match, and the fans were really into the action, and really into Mcgee as a potential superstar by the end of this match. However, as we all know, it all went wrong for Mcgee after that match. Mcgee was with the WWE for another 3 or so years after that, was on the road a lot of the time, doing house show loop with the WWF at the time, but kept off of television, and did in fact have another match with Bret Hart in 1989, so 3 years later, which was once again taped but not shown. But of course, this wasn't the Holy Grail match that everyone was after in the tape trading community. However, Tom Mcgee's hot match, the one we were all talking about with Bret from 1986, was so good because he was in there with Bret Hart, of course. It was, of course, Bret who guided Mcgee every step of the way, calling every spot and essentially giving Mcgee the match of his life. It's sad to say that despite Mcgee looking dynamite in this match, he was never able to replicate anything close to how good he looked against Bret with any other opponent that he was in the ring with. He did have 1 or 2 okay matches with Ted DiBiase, for example, and that second match with Bret in 1989. But he never looked as good as he did in this match in 1986 with Bret Hart against any other opponent, and Vince very quickly soured on Tom Mcgee. This was a real shame, as Tom obviously had a lot of potential and was a big, great looking, very agile and a very athletic man who, with maybe the right trainer, could have been something more. I think if Tom Mcgee was around today, he would have had the Performance Center in Orlando, Florida. He would have the Indies, where he could hone and develop his craft and his talent. There wouldn't be this massive expectation that he had to be perfect straight away, which was obviously the expectation, especially after this fantastic match with Bret Hart in 1986. The documentary portion of this match was also very good, with interviews with wrestling talent such as Hall of Fame X-Pac. It had Cassius Ohno on there, as well as Bret Hart, and the lady who had the tape all of these years with this match on it without ever really knowing it. Her name was Mary Kate Anthony, who is a long-time wrestling fan, massive supporter of Bret Hart, was also a photographer at wrestling events, which is where she got to know many of the wrestlers, including Bret Hart, and how she eventually came into possession of this tape in 2 big bags of VHS videotapes, which also included the infamous match that we're talking about, Bret Hart versus Tom Mcgee. The actual tape was mislabeled with the date of their 1989 match on it. However, upon closer inspection, it was indeed the infamous 1986 match, which had only been seen by a small handful of people. This was the days where, because obviously WWF at the time had no plans for Tom Mcgee, they didn't keep, or they apparently didn't keep the master copy of that tape. Bret Hart ended up with a copy of the tape. He would catalogue all of his matches at that time on VHS. They were being transferred onto DVD. This Mary Kate was part of the process in terms of turning all of Bret Hart's VHS catalogue onto DVD. She was then told to do what you want with the VHS videos. They were no longer needed, being as they were backed up onto VHS, and that's how she became in possession of the tapes. They were kept up in a loft for years and years. And yeah, like I say, this match was only seen by a small handful of people, including a handful of Hart family members who saw the match around 1996 at a Hart family gathering. Some of these Hart family members included Tyson Kidd and Harry Smith, the son of David Boy Smith, the British Bulldog, of course, who also appeared in this documentary to give their thoughts on the lost tape from that brief glimpse that they saw when they saw this match many years earlier. Towards the end of the documentary, we see Mcgee looking almost unrecognisable to how he looked 33 years earlier. And he gets to see the match for the very first time. After the match, the interviewer told him that he was originally viewed as being the next big thing and possibly being looked at as a replacement for Hulk Hogan, who at the time, remember this was 1986, this was the height of Hulkamania. This was when Hulk Hogan was the world champion and was the height of his popularity, was the biggest thing in pro wrestling at the time. And Tom Mcgee, even then, was being viewed as the next Hogan, and no one even told him. He didn't even know that Vince McMahon had what Vince McMahon had in store for him. After that match with Bret, Mcgee looked happy but surprised and possibly a little taken aback that he never knew that he had a shot at being the next big thing without ever being told by anybody in the WWF office. There was a special, there is a special panel at next week's Starcast, which precedes Double or Nothing in Las Vegas, where Bret Hart and Tom Mcgee will get the chance to talk face to face about this match and about the significance of this match and the story behind the tape having been having been missing for over 30 years. So definitely go out of your way to watch this on the WWE Network. It's one of the best things I've seen all week. If nothing else, it definitely puts over how awesome a talent Bret Hart was in helping Tom Mcgee through this match, as he did with every opponent in his career, cementing Hart as definitely the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be for sure. But Tom Mcgee came across as a great human being, very, very humble, and delighted with the match and delighted with kind of the excitement and the buzz that this match and this tape has created over the years. I'm sure that there's been a lot of people that probably weren't aware of Tom Mcgee before seeing this documentary that are now, and all I can say is that he's definitely made a fan out of me for sure, and yeah, I want nothing but the best for Tom Mcgee in the future. So yeah, definitely go out of your way to watch that, the Holy Grail on the WWE Network. It was also reported this week, I think it was after Raw, and there was a caller that called into Wade Keller's podcast, and it was on air, and basically he described himself as being a close friend of 3 current creative members, and as well as knowing Triple H and many others within the WWE, and basically stating that Triple H and many other members within the WWE are extremely frustrated with Vince McMahon. Now, I kind of get this report directly from the Turning Heel Facebook page. So a good friend of mine, David Anderson, who's been on this podcast many times before, posted this on his Turning Heel Facebook page. And of course, it was the Pro Wrestling Torch post-Raw podcast, and yeah, he described himself as a close friend of 3 WWE writers, and he called in and he said the following, and this is about kind of creative at present time, and the general frustrations of Triple H with Vince McMahon. I shall read what he said on the Pro Wrestling Torch post-Raw podcast. He goes on to say, no one should rip on WWE creative. They have some of the most brilliant, unbelievable, cool ideas I've ever heard. We're writing for an audience of just one, and never forget that. The audience of one being Vince McMahon, of course. The most frustrated person in the back every single night is Triple H. He'll always take, especially the NXT guys, under his wing. It looks like he's consoling them. It looks so much like he was the most frustrated person in the building every single night. Additional highlights of this phone call includes the wildcard rule was not in the script on the morning of the show, so that was something that was kind of dreamt up during the day, through the day, leading up to Monday Night Raw a couple of weeks ago by Vince McMahon himself. The WWE Superstar shake-up changed week to week, and it didn't pan out how it was originally laid out months prior. So it was originally planned months prior, and of course being advertised months prior. Everything changed because Vince just decided to change it. He talked about how the turnover, the massive turnover with so many backstage people quitting or being fired. He talks about SmackDown and Raw writing teams are the same for both shows. They used to be separate, but that changed recently after the shake-up. The caller on this Pro Wrestling Torch podcast said that the problem with WWE is not the creative's fault, and that Vince McMahon is the one person who deserves the blame. Vince wants suggestions from everybody, but it never gets on TV. 99 out of 100 times you can come up with an idea for Vince and it won't be used. The entire creative team have pitched to have Raw and SmackDown look completely different, with different production, a different way of shooting things, etc., and Vince McMahon shoots it down. Vince McMahon doesn't keep track of what's going on in NXT. He maybe watches takeover shows. That's a direct quote, but doesn't appear to watch the weekly TV of NXT. The writers say he just watches WWE and works out, and is not aware of things going on in the real world. The writers say there is no chance of Vince stepping down. There was an idea pitched for Dana Brooke. Dana Brooke has been the hardest worker for the last 3 years. She goes to the PC, she shows up early and helps set up the ring. She gets in the ring so that she can get better. Creative will pitch something for her, and she gets nothing up until recently being given a spot in the Money in the Bank match. The caller offered to tell Wade Keller off air of some of the cool storylines that had been pitched but never used. The writers he talked to were all working for Dana Warrior, and it's a really, really awkward atmosphere with these experienced writers that this caller knows working under Dana Warrior, who has no prior experience within the wrestling business apart from having been married to the Ultimate Warrior, of course. The WWE Fox contract prohibits Fox from moving the show to FS1 even if the ratings drop. So yeah, what we said earlier about Fox not tolerating poor ratings or dwindling ratings from SmackDown when it launches on the Fox channel in October probably won't matter anyway, even if the product is poor or if ratings do drop, but it might mean that they won't get a second term when that contract expires. One writer is very close to quitting because he is so unbelievably unhappy, and many of the writers are paranoid and think they're close to being fired. It is such a toxic atmosphere, and it's all because of one person, that person being Vince McMahon. When Neville walked out of the WWE, that was a crazy shouting match, and he flipped out on Vince McMahon, and that was the last time they saw of Neville. The writers praised Neville for being so easy to work with prior to that falling out with Vince McMahon. Ideas never pan out as originally planned because writers will come up with stuff and then Vince loses interest after a week or two. He used the Mojo Rawley character change as an example. The money is good and it's a dream job for many of the writers, but it gets frustrating. The talent is very unhappy and people are trying to get out of their contracts, which we've spoken about before on this podcast. The writers say that Bruce Pritchard is a pleasure to work with. He's a funny guy and a pleasure to work with, but he's not getting through to Vince either. Now, that was one thing that I was hoping would kind of help the product, is Bruce Pritchard being there behind the scenes as part of the creative team, and having that long-term relationship with Vince McMahon going back to 1987. But it appears that Bruce Pritchard is not getting through to Vince on some of these ideas and storylines himself either. The caller goes on to say that Shane McMahon, Triple H and Stephanie McMahon have tried to talk to Vince, but it hasn't worked. The people in the writing staff listen to podcasts and they hear fans bashing them, and it breaks their heart when they hear the fans on podcasts bashing them for creative ideas. Vince is in the announcer's ear to the sentence as described by the caller, and he gets on them for the tiniest of mistakes. On Sami Zayn, that's not Sami Zayn's promo, that's Vince McMahon talking through Sami Zayn, and we all know what promos he's referring to. Sami Zayn's actually been on fire of recent weeks with his return to Monday Night Raw. There are a total of 37 writers, and they're all now working on both shows. NBC Universal and Fox both want the top stars to be present, so the caller goes on to say that when the show goes on to NBC Universal and Fox, that of course you're going to have more of your Ronda Rouseys and your Brock Lesnar's and your John Cena's and your Roman Reigns by the sounds of it. Andrade went into Vince's office and asked for a legit push. Vince looked at him and said, "Learn some English and get back to me." Andrade spoke some English last week, and he's been, on last week's SmackDown, he's been taking English lessons, so he's definitely putting himself out there to learn more English. But that came across as rather a rude comment by Vince McMahon. The Firefly Funhouse stuff is all Bray Wyatt's idea. Bray is described as an absolute genius behind the scenes, and he helps other wrestlers with their promos. He's one of the best guys in the locker room also. The writers he talked to say that they loved it when there was the real legit brand split, but now things just seem to be merging into one again, especially with the wild card rule, which a lot of us think is a bit of a joke. And he mentions the Revival and Usos storyline being done because Vince just finds it funny. So there you go. A lot to digest there, but it definitely creates quite a bit of a dark and unhappy scene behind the curtain in the WWE, certainly in the creative team. And when he describes that 99 ideas out of 100 are shot down by Vince, and that ideas are being scrapped at the last minute, with scripts being rewritten with 4 minutes to go before the show goes on air, and not even Triple H, Bruce Pritchard, Shane or Stephanie McMahon can get through to Vince. Yeah, it's interesting to see, but then Vince's hand might be forced with the fall in ratings. His hand might be forced with the with AEW, and his hand might be forced with Fox wanting a better product overall. So interesting times, very interesting times. Let's have a look at NXT UK from this week. And the first match on NXT UK shows Piper Niven versus Jamie Hayter. So this match didn't go too long, with Piper Niven being given a little bit of a wake-up call with a slap across the face from Jamie Hayter. That was pretty much all the motivation that Piper needed, as she hit her opponent with a running crossbody or running cannonball into the corner, followed by her awesome Michinoku driver in the centre of the ring for the relatively easy pinfall victory. Great to see Jamie Hayter in an NXT UK ring here, but another decent and quick win for Piper Niven. Then we get a Toni Storm interview, and she recaps how Nina Samuels the prior week made things personal, bringing Toni Storm's family into the conversation. And that was in last week's NXT UK. Tony's decided to put a title on the line in a future match with Nina Samuels. Then we see Cassius Ohno wants to be part of the tournament to see who'll be part of the Fatal 4-Way #1 contenders match. So it looks like we're going to get Cassius Ohno as part of this tournament, and expect to see him in one of the qualifying matches fairly soon. But speaking of one of the qualifying matches to see who goes through to the Fatal 4-Way match, in 3 weeks' time now, we get Leggero versus Jordan Devlin. So Devlin has been awesome for a long time now, and put in an impressive match against WWE UK champion Walter a couple of weeks ago on NXT UK in a non-title match. Here we see Devlin and Leggero both want to be part of that Fatal 4-Way match in 3 weeks' time, to see who will be the number one contender against whoever will be the WWE UK champion at the time. Remember, on next week's NXT, we've got Walter and Pete Dunne too for the title, and that will be awesome. Devlin takes the match to Leggero with a vicious backbreaker, which disables Leggero for a short period of time, keeping him grounded. Devlin nails his Uranagi standing moonsault combo for a close-near fall. Leggero manages to reverse an attempted back suplex into a crossbody, followed by a drop kick, and gets the 2 count of his own. Devlin brings up his knees to catch Leggero from an attempted splash from the top rope. Then Jordan hits a power bomb followed by a close near fall from a springboard splash from the Leeds luchador. So that's Jordan Devlin been put through the ringer there. Jordan is quickly able to reverse the tide with his ripcord backdrop driver. He calls it the Devlin driver, or the Devlin side, for the hard-fought pinfall win in a very competitive match against Leggero, the very popular Leggero, and it was an excellent match, a really good match between these two. Devlin gets on the mic to say that he doesn't need a number one contenders match. He is the number one contender. Devlin says that it doesn't matter how you stack the deck. He doesn't care who it is, whether it's the Joker or the King, who still falls short of the Irish Ace. So that was a fun match between two of the finest on the UK indie scene, and two of the finest on NXT UK, of course, but Devlin is able to progress to the next round. Then we hear from Walter. He said that the reason why he gave Pete Dunne a rematch is because Pete Dunne is versatile and that he brings out the best in Pete Dunne. We will see the much anticipated rematch, Dunne versus Walter 2, next week, and we'll be reviewing it right here on Wrestling with Johners. We then see Moustache Mountain, who say that James Drake and Zach Gibson must do the right thing and give them their rematch that they deserve for the NXT UK Tag Team titles. And of course, the last time they had that opportunity was in the final of the tournament to crown the first ever NXT UK Tag Team Champions at NXT UK TakeOver Blackpool, and that was an excellent 4.5-star match. Then we get the debut of Ilya Dragunov. Now he takes on Jack Stars. Now we've seen Jack Stars before in an NXT UK ring, most notably when he received that astonishing beating by Walter, which I think he is still feeling the results of even today. Dragunov displays all of his intensity as he enters the ring. So a fantastic entrance, fantastic entity, an awesome entrance music as well for Ilya Dragunov. Now, I've not seen an awful lot of Ilya Dragunov, as I mentioned on the Super Strong Style 16 review show last week. I've not seen Ilya Dragunov live. I've seen him in many matches on DVD and on Progress on Demand, and I remember that career-defining match against Pete Dunne at Wembley Arena last September, and Dragunov has had amazing matches with Walter in WXW. But back to this match, Dragunov delivers 2 stiff-running clotheslines to Star in the corner. Star does try to make a comeback with a drop kick and a sleeper hold, but Dragunov hits a chop and a senton, eventually ending the match with his Torpedo Moscow corkscrew running uppercut. It's a corkscrew uppercut. It was stunning, whatever it was, and a very impressive debut win there for Ilya Dragunov in only 4 minutes. And yeah, we'll look forward to seeing much more from him. It looks like we'll be seeing a rematch. A lot of rematches being discussed in this episode, but we'll be seeing a rematch between Noam Dar and Mark Andrews. And remember, the last time we saw Noam Dar and Mark Andrews in the same ring, Noam Dar and Mark Andrews both got stretchered out with injuries, and Noam Dar has made a recent return, and he's looking for a rematch against Mark Andrews. Then we get a match between Killer Kelly versus Xia Brookside. So we see a fairly competitive start to this match between Kelly and Xia until the match is interrupted by the music of Ginny and then the return of one Jazzy Gabbert. So we haven't seen Jazzy Gabbert since the Mayan Classic 2017. Killer Kelly looks like she's going to stand alongside Xia Brookside in this, and then gets the hell out of Dodge. Of course, being the natural heel that she is, leaving Brookside all by herself. Gabbert destroys Brookside with a gigantic flatliner, and it looks like Ginny has a new ally in Jazzy Gabbert. Gabbert is back on the scene. Like I say, the last time we saw her was a couple of years ago. She's been out, got surgery to repair a neck injury. Yeah, she's been re-signed. We first saw her in the front row at NXT UK TakeOver Blackpool, and this is her official return, and she's aligning herself with Ginny. So a really cool kind of re-debut for Jazzy in the WWE and under the NXT UK umbrella. Great entrance music. All I can say is wow. Great to have Jazzy Gabbert back alongside Ginny. That was pretty awesome. Then we get confirmation from Johnny Saint that Nina Samuels will indeed be getting her opportunity against NXT UK Women's Champion Toni Storm in just 2 weeks' time for the NXT UK Women's Championship. And then we get the main event of this week's NXT UK, and it's another qualifying match to see who will be entered into the Fatal 4-Way #1 Contenders match in 3 weeks' time. And this is the Bomber Dave Mastiff versus Gallus member Wolfgang. So Wolfgang, the hometown hero, of course, despite being a natural heel under normal circumstances. Dave Mastiff does manage to get the relatively quick win against the Gallus member Wolfgang after Wolfgang misses his senton from the top rope, allowing the Bomber to execute a brutal German suplex, sending Wolfgang into the corner before finishing off his opponent with his brutal running cannonball, covering and getting the pinfall victory. We then see Joe and Mark Kofi, fellow Gallus stablemates of Wolfgang, rush the ring to attack the victorious Dave Mastiff, where they manage to get the Bomber down to the canvas, allowing Wolfgang to climb to the top once again. And with Mark and Joe holding Mastiff's arms and legs, keeping him outstretched in the middle of the ring, Wolfgang does come crashing down onto his opponent with a top rope senton, laying Mastiff out as this hour of NXT UK comes to a close. Have to say, really enjoyable episode of NXT UK. You don't often get a bad episode of NXT UK, to be honest with you. Love the match between Jordan Devlin and Leggero. Yet another strong win from Piper Niven. An excellent debut from Ilya Dragunov. Poor Jack Stars. He does put himself through the ringer with these debuting superstars. First Walter, now Ilya Dragunov. Yeah, a fun main event. And yeah, some really good segments. Love the kind of re-debut of Jazzy Gabbert, and very dominant entrance there, very dominant appearance and a dominant beatdown of Xia Brookside. Ginny aligning herself with Jazzy Gabbert. I think that's going to be a great heel combo. And yeah, great to have Jazzy Gabbert in the ring again under the WWE banner, this time NXT UK, and Ginny, yeah, two excellent members of the NXT UK women's roster, and I can't wait to see what transpires between those two, or with those two in NXT UK in the coming weeks. An excellent episode of NXT UK. Let's have a little look at this week's NXT. The first thing we notice when NXT starts this week is we've got no more Percy Watson. So Percy Watson has left the WWE, and we've got Beth Phoenix in the commentary booth with Nigel McGuinness and Mauro Ranallo replacing Percy Watson. And we've seen Beth commentate quite a few times before. She's part of the commentary team in the 2018 Mae Young Classic, part of the commentary team at last year's Evolution pay-per-view, and yeah, we've seen Beth Phoenix back in the ring more recently at WrestleMania as part of that four-way tag team championship for the WWE Women's Tag Team titles at WrestleMania, and she was one of the more standout members, one of the more standout, more impressive wrestlers of that match. First of all, we get to the NXT Tag Team Champions, the Viking Raiders, Viking War Raiders Experience, whatever they're called. They come out to the ring to address their NXT future. Hansen says that over the last few weeks they have raided a Monday Night Raw and brutalised the tag team division on Raw, but they are still the NXT Tag Team Champions. Rowe asks for Mr. Regal to come out and join them right there in the ring. Rowe says that since there is no one that can take their titles from them, they're here tonight to relinquish their titles. Just as Regal responds, we hear the music from the ever popular, very, very fantastic and entertaining Street Profits Montez Ford and Angelo Dawkins. There's a loud Profits chants from the fans. Ford says that they are far from no one, and that a few weeks ago they brought the fight to them, to the Raiders, and although they didn't win the match, the Raiders realised something, and that is that the Street Profits can beat the Viking Raiders. Ford says that deep down the Raiders know that the Profits can beat them. Dawkins then comes out with a line of the night by saying, if that's your real name. That receives a huge pop from the NXT faithful. Rowe tells Regal to make the match, and the NXT general manager announces the title defence, with the Viking Raiders putting their titles on the line against the Street Profits later on in this episode. That was a hot opening to this week's show. And if their confrontation this week is half as hot, half as great a match as the one they had a few weeks ago, then tonight's match is going to be amazing. Then we get a recap from last week's main event match between Matt Riddle and Adam Cole, with interference from Roddy Strong, that awesome super kick from Cole, and the bro mission from Matt Riddle for the tap out win, as well as the post-match tension between Cole and Strong, leading to Strong throwing his undisputed armband and t-shirt at Cole, appearing to walk out on the faction. In a backstage interview, Kathy Kelly sees Cole, Fish and O'Reilly, with Cole explaining the issue from the previous week, when a bunch of suits running towards an issue in up the parking lot. Then we see Roddy Strong come back into the frame from the distraction, from the direction of the ruckus that appeared to happen somewhere in the parking lot, to approach Undisputed members Cole, Fish and O'Reilly. Roddy says that he's been thinking a lot about what happened last week, and that he realised that Cole was right and that they are stronger together, and when they're on the same page. Roddy finishes by saying to Cole that the Matt Riddle problem that he has been taken care of, and then he asks, so what's next? So it appears that the Undisputed Era are back together, with Roddy Strong appearing to be back on the same page as Adam Cole, at least for now. Then we get a match between Cesar Bononi and the returning Keith Lee. So Keith Lee has been out for a number of weeks with an injury, which occurred prior to WrestleMania, if I'm not mistaken. And there were rumours that Keith Lee will be going up against Dominik Dijakovic in a pre-show match at TakeOver New York ahead of WrestleMania. But as we all know, that didn't happen due to Keith Lee's injury. The fans are really into Keith Lee here, with huge "Oh, bask in his glory" chants. It's interesting to see that Bononi looks just as big and just as intimidating as Keith Lee in this match, with Bononi standing easily a good 6'6" and weighing a good 260, 270 pounds. Keith Lee takes a few strikes from Bononi here before getting the upper hand with a huge pounce, sending Bononi into outer space, really, or certainly to the other side of the ring, before finishing the match with a massive and devastating powerbomb with a win in under 4 minutes. With Lee's new entrance music, enthusiastic crowd response, and a dominant win here, it looks like, and it looks as though Keith Lee has the momentum going forward. The next step for Keith Lee has to be a match on a takeover. Lee has been on the brand for over a year now, and is yet to appear on a takeover card, despite Lee being brought in as a big name from the Indies. Let's give this guy a push, and hopefully a big match with another big name soon. However, as reported on Wrestling with John's Facebook page last week, this is not likely to be against Dominik Dijakovic, as he is out with an injury, having just had surgery for a torn meniscus, which will likely keep him out of action for 3 to 4 months. So we'll have to wait to see that rematch between Lee and Dijakovic. Kathy Kelly is backstage once again, this time to officially announce that after last week's skirmish at the Performance Centre, Shayna Baszler will indeed defend her NXT Women's Championship at TakeOver 25 against Io Shirai. This will be the first time that we've seen Shayna and Shirai go one-on-one in an NXT ring. There have been a couple of tag matches where these two have featured, but never a singles confrontation. That's another match that's going to kind of blow the roof off of that arena at TakeOver 25. Kathy Kelly is then approached by the Forgotten Sons, who has a bit of momentum after recent wins, especially in their match against Birch Lorcan and Humberto Carrillo. But they're all set to storm into William Regal's office to find out why the Street Profits have been given a title shot against the War Raiders over them. All three eventually storm into Regal's office, all three of the Forgotten Sons, saying that they need to talk and that they won't be forgotten any longer. Then we see a match between Kona Reeves and Kushida. And then we saw Kushida in a very successful debut match against Cassius Ohno a couple of weeks back now, as David Anderson, podcaster, co-host, mentions, we reviewed Kushida's debut match a couple of weeks ago, and his entrance music is fairly generic, if I'm honest with you. Nothing too special about Kushida's entrance music. His entrance is something very special, but his entrance music needs a little bit of work. Hopefully we'll see a bit of a change up in his music fairly soon. There's plenty of ground holds from Kushida in the early going in this match against Kona Reeves until Drew Gulak appears on the stage, appearing to scout Kushida. Now, the last time we saw Gulak in an NXT ring was against Matt Riddle a couple of months back. The match here moves into a higher gear with a handspring elbow from Kushida and a guillotine from Kushida, followed by a reverse heel kick to the face of Kona Reeves and a very impressive plancha from the top turnbuckle onto his opponent, standing on the outside. So quite an exciting high spot there from Kushida. Kushida manages to applies hoverboard lock onto Kona Reeves for the submission win, and Kushida definitely showed me more in this match with his range of moves as compared to his previous match against Cassius Ohno, which was a little bit more of a striking exchange. We then see Johnny Gargano tending to Matt Riddle in the doctor's room or the trainer's room backstage, and he appears to be nursing some injuries, including some bruised ribs after the apparent attack by Roderick Strong in the parking lot. Earlier on, Johnny says that you do not want to mess with a fully fit Matt Riddle when he's back on his feet. Johnny then sends out a challenge to Adam Cole, who will be Johnny Gargano's championship opponent at TakeOver 25 on the 1st of June. So only a couple of weeks to wait until we see that one. That match was announced earlier this week, and as was the NXT Women's Championship match between Shayna Baszler and Io Shirai. As I mentioned earlier, both of these two matches will be first class, and of course will be reviewed right here in a special TakeOver 25 review on Wrestling with Johners. Then we see a match between Vanessa Bourne and Jessie. So Vanessa Bourne is accompanied by her kind of ally, you could say, in Aaliyah. This is one of the first times that we've seen Jessie in the ring since she signed with to an NXT contract. Of course, we saw Jessie as part of last year's Mae Young Classic, but she's been in kind of developmental, working on her game. She's been doing the Florida house show loop with the NXT crew. Bourne does get the upper hand on the early on in this match, with Aaliyah getting involved with a slap to the face on Jessie on the outside. Vanessa Bourne, however, gets the nod in this match with a modified neckbreaker for the impressive win, and things appear to be looking up for Vanessa Bourne. Then we get the main event, the Viking Raiders versus the Street Profits for the NXT Tag Team Championships. So unlike their match a few weeks ago, the Viking Raiders took control fairly early on, but are then surprised with an early roll-up and a 2 count from the Street Profits. There's dueling cartwheels demonstrated here by Dawkins and Hanson. The Profits get another 2 count from an outstanding frog splash from Montez Ford. The Forgotten Sons then come out. They said they wanted to be involved, and they are being involved. They come out of nowhere, came out from the back, where they are met by the Viking Raiders in the aisleway on the ramp, soon to be accompanied by the Street Profits. Then the duo of Danny Burch and Oney Lorcan run out to join in on the fun. The referee calls for the bell on the end of the match. Hanson nails a crazy senton onto the Forgotten Sons on the outside. Hawkins, although the match has ended, he hoists Rowe into an electric chair, allowing Ford to hit a crazy blockbuster onto Rowe from Dawkins' shoulders. That was an awesome spot. The Raiders recover enough to destroy Wesley Blake before picking their NXT Tag Team Championship belts from the canvas. Then, in a shocking twist, at the very end of this show, we see Rowe and Hanson lay their belts in the middle of the ring before bowing to the fans, with reports coming from those that were at the tapings that the Viking Raiders actually vacated their belts as they said they were going to at the beginning of the show. And that could be the very last time that we see the Viking Raiders in an NXT ring, supposedly vacating their belts. It was also reported coming out of the final set of tapings from Full Sail that the NXT Tag Team Championships will be up for grabs. They're officially vacated, and they will be up for grabs at TakeOver 25 in a 4-way tag match between the Street Profits, the Forgotten Sons, Birch and Lorcan, and the Undisputed Era. So another fine episode of NXT. Excellent opening segment with the Street Profits and the War Raiders, and the match being set for an excellent main event between those two teams, and the skirmish at the end. Lots going on, lots of fun stuff. 2 fun matches announced for TakeOver 25, with Io Shirai taking on Shayna Baszler for the Women's Championship, and Adam Cole going up against Johnny Gargano in a rematch from their WrestleMania weekend encounter, TakeOver New York. This time just a 1-fall match for the NXT Championship, and that will more than likely be another classic, but another fun episode of NXT. Now we're going to look at Money in the Bank and my predictions for how I think Money in the Bank is going to go this coming Sunday. So the first match we're going to look at is the first of 2 Becky Lynch title defences. Now, of course, she is Becky 2 belts, the man, having won all the women's gold at WrestleMania, of course. She holds the Raw Women's Championship. She holds the SmackDown Live Women's Championship. And the first match we're going to talk about is her match against Lacey Evans for the Raw Women's Championship. So we've not seen a lot of Lacey Evans since she's come up onto the main roster, and I think that we first saw her strutting her stuff up and down the rampway from about January, February onwards. But she's got a great look. She's got a fairly fun gimmick that a lot of people are getting into. She does play a good heel on TV. She definitely does play a good heel, and she does have some good moves. I've seen that kind of that springboard moonsault she does, where she jumps from the middle rope, does a flip onto the top rope, and then does her moonsault. That's pretty good. It has come off looking a little bit dangerous once or twice, but she does show a lot of promise, a lot of athleticism. She is a great looking wrestler, and I think that she's held in quite high regard backstage, possibly by Vince McMahon anyway. So this match for the Raw Women's Championship, Becky Lynch, the champion, versus Lacey Evans. This could be an interesting match. Are we likely to see a title change? Yes, I think that there's a good chance of a title change here. I mean, remember that Becky Lynch is also facing Charlotte, where she's defending her SmackDown Live Women's Championship. Now you have to ask yourself, is it likely that Becky Lynch will walk out on Sunday night successful in both of her title matches? The odds are against her, honestly. Who is she most likely to lose to? I think that they're looking to make a new star in Lacey Evans. I think they are looking to make a new star. I think that if Lacey loses here, I think it could have a bit of a detrimental effect. I think they are looking to make a new star, and I think because of that, Becky can afford to take the loss here. She will lose the championship to Lacey Evans. Lacey Evans will be the new Raw Women's Champion, but Becky Lynch will still have the SmackDown Live Women's Championship. So my first prediction, I think Lacey Evans is going over. Out of the 2 matches between Lacey Evans and her match with Charlotte, Lacey Evans is probably the match that Becky Lynch is most likely to win, or if it was an even contest, based on experience and everything. But I think because WWE are looking to make a new star, I think Lacey Evans is going over here. Then we've got the match between Roman Reigns and Elias. Now, Elias has had this kind of on-off, hot-cold kind of push. Yes, he's over with the fans. Yes, he's great at entertaining the fans on the stall with his guitar, singing the songs in the middle of the ring. But yes, he's been put up against people like John Cena in a WrestleMania. impromptu match, and against The Undertaker on Raw after this year's WrestleMania. Not in a match once again, so he's not getting proper matches. He's just getting segments where he's entertaining the crowd, and somebody comes out, beats him up, and moves on. But this is kind of, I would say, Elias's first really high-profile match against Roman Reigns. Now, Roman Reigns returned back to the ring after coming back from having cancer. Leukemia last year, and he did perform at WrestleMania where he beat Drew McIntyre. Roman Reigns is going to win, isn't he, really? Although there could be some outside interference. I know that Elias is aligning himself with other heels that could give him maybe an edge, an advantage. Yeah, I'm going to go with Roman Reigns only because that's the obvious answer, to be honest with you. It'd be great if Elias won the match just to once again try and make a new star. And that's the only way that WWE are really going to make these new names and make these new stars like the Lacey Evans and like the Eliases, is by getting them to win. But I think Roman Reigns is going to go over here. I think it's going to be Roman Reigns doing his John Cena Superman act all over again. Yeah, expect Roman Reigns to get some boos here, though, and expect Elias to be fairly popular with the fans. We'll see. The next match, let's have a look at The Miz versus Shane McMahon. So this is going to be a steel cage match. The match at WrestleMania was definitely entertaining, definitely hard hitting, definitely some bumps there that both of these two individuals took along the way, and in their fairly kind of handy match at WrestleMania. Certainly the bump that Shane took when he got clotheslined over the railing out in the crowd onto the top of a golf buggy and then hard onto the concrete floor, having fallen off the top of the golf buggy, was, wow, enough to send anybody to hospital under normal circumstances. And then that suplex off that TV gantry, yes, although there was plenty of padding when they fell, that was an awesome spot to watch. Some really good stuff. But of course, Shane McMahon taking the victory in the end of WrestleMania. This time, The Miz looking to get revenge inside a steel cage. Now, I wish that they'd bring back them kind of blue steel cages like they had back in the 80s and the 90s. Yes, they hurt like hell, but they looked legit. They looked good. Whereas these new cages, you've got like a wire mesh around the outside, and I'm sure if you get thrown against it, it's not too pleasant. I certainly wouldn't want to be thrown against any sort of steel cage. But it doesn't look like it really hurts, compared to the blue ones. Bring back the blue ones. I would like to see Miz get his revenge, but I'm also quite digging the Shane McMahon character. I love his entrance, especially when he gets Greg Hamilton to do his introduction. That is just brilliant, and really makes an awesome heel out of Shane McMahon, somebody you really want to hate and boo and punch in the face. But I like the heel Shane McMahon, I really do. There's rumours that he could be going on to possibly have a series of matches against whoever the WWE champion might be somewhere down the line. And that is, of course, currently Kofi Kingston, so you never know. I'd like to see The Miz win, but I think Shane McMahon will probably win again, to be honest with you. I think this is definitely a match where the heel is going over. Samoa Joe versus Rey Mysterio. Of course, we've had Rey Mysterio's son, Dominic, get involved in the storyline over recent weeks. It's been an okay storyline, to be honest with you. I've always been a big fan of heel Samoa Joe. I think he's awesome on the mic. Vicious in the ring. I think he looks legit. It looks like everything he does means something and means like it's meant to hurt. This could be a good match. You've got two contrasting styles here. You've got the added bit of storyline development with Dominic almost certainly being involved. It wouldn't surprise me if he accompanies Rey down to the ring, but possibly could Dominic turn heel on his father, align with Samoa Joe? somehow giving Joe the victory. I don't know. There's definitely a story there, isn't there? Because do you remember, was it SummerSlam 2006, I want to say, where Eddie Guerrero was saying that he was Dominic's pappy, and that custody of Dominic was put on the line to the winner of that ladder match between Rey and Eddie. And I think Rey won to gain custody of his own bloody son. This could be an interesting one. I'm going to say, just to be controversial, Samoa Joe, and I think Dominic's going to turn heel on his dad. Then you got the match between Tony Nese and Ariya Daivari for the Cruiserweight Championship. Bit of a nothing match really. Won't surprise me if it goes on the pre-show, although it's not listed to be on the pre-show just yet. If ever there was a Cruiserweight Championship match to be on the pre-show, it was certainly this one. This one hasn't caught my interest at all, to be honest with you. I'm going to say Tony Nese. Too soon for him to lose the championship after only just winning it at WrestleMania. Then you've got, let's have a look here, Daniel Bryan and Rowan versus the Usos. Now, Daniel Bryan and Rowan are the new SmackDown Live Tag Team Champions. They were virtually handed the belts by Shane McMahon on a recent episode of SmackDown Live. I think that this led to a match. Did the New Day wrestle Daniel Bryan and Rowan? I can't remember. It's all starting to blend into one. Anyway, the Usos came out this past week on SmackDown Live as part of the wild card nonsense, and basically they're Raw. They're Raw, right? They're definitely on Raw. Yeah, I'm sure they went to Raw as part of the shake-up, and now they're back on SmackDown. Only a few weeks after leaving SmackDown, challenging for the SmackDown Tag Team Championship. It's ridiculous. So Daniel Bryan and Rowan. Daniel Bryan and I like it. I'm digging that tag team. I am digging that tag team. Rowan just looks like an absolute menace you wouldn't want to meet down a dark alley. And Daniel Bryan, I just love his heel character. I think he's awesome. I can't believe this is on the pre-show. This is on the pre-show. What the hell? SmackDown Tag Team Champions. You got Daniel Bryan, who was the WWE Champion only last month, going into WrestleMania. The Usos. Yeah, crikey, what's going on? I hope this isn't on the pre-show, but it's scheduled to be on the pre-show. Daniel Bryan and Rowan has got to win, although I love the Usos. This could be a good match. This could be the match of the night, to be honest with you, but it's going to be on the pre-show. Anyway, let's move on. Let's have a look. So, Seth Rollins versus AJ Styles for the Universal Championship. Seth Rollins having beaten Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania for the Universal Champion in that super hot opener in New Jersey, the MetLife Stadium, versus AJ Styles, and they've never faced each other on the WWE ring. The only time they have fought each other was when Seth Rollins was just breaking in on an indie show about 13 years ago, and AJ Styles won that encounter. But of course, this is back when Seth Rollins was relatively new. I'd say probably been in the business 2 or 3 years at that point. AJ Styles, was already a bit of a vet on the indies. This is going to be an epic match. This is going to be really epic. Two very similar kind of fast-paced, technical wrestlers that don't mind, leaving the canvas and doing a bit of high flying. Both very good from the top turnbuckle or from the top rope. Yeah, this is going to be a great match. I'd love to see this one go on last, to be honest with you. It does have a real main event feel. I think if they're given a good 15-20 minutes, this could be an awesome match. Who am I going to go with? I've got to go with Seth Rollins, mainly because he's just been crowned Universal Champion. He's just beaten the Beast at WrestleMania. I think it's too soon for him to drop the championship. And I think it's too soon for AJ Styles to be Universal Champion, being as he's just gone on to Raw. So I'm going to go with Seth Rollins here. Should be a great match. Then you've got, let's see what we still need to cover. Okay, Becky Lynch versus Charlotte Flair. So as I said, Becky 2 belts, pulling double duty. I've already predicted that Lacey Evans is going to win the Raw Women's Championship. Now send your hate mail. Here she's going up against Charlotte Flair. Now, as I said, out of the 2 matches, you would expect her to lose to Charlotte and beat Lacey Evans, but I said they're trying to build a new star, make a new star, and I think that's where Lacey Evans wins the Raw Women's Championship. I can't see Becky Lynch losing both belts, and I think she's going to retain against Charlotte, and this is going to be a fantastic match. Once again, you very, very rarely see a bad Charlotte Flair match, and they've had an awesome rivalry, yeah. If AJ Styles and Seth Rollins doesn't go on last, and this could very well main event the whole show once again. I think Becky Lynch is walking out with at least one belt, and retaining her SmackDown Women's Championship against Charlotte Flair here. Then you've got Kofi Kingston versus Kevin Owens for the WWE Championship. So Kofi Mania has been running wild this year. That gauntlet match that preceded Elimination Chamber, the Elimination Chamber match, the storyline building up through Fastlane and towards WrestleMania, where Kofi was fighting and battling and scratching and clawing to be part of that WWE Championship match at WrestleMania, and he eventually got his match after going through so many hurdles, so many trials and tribulations, so many gauntlet matches, to face Daniel Bryan, and then an epic match, an epic 25-minute match that was certainly match of the night against Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania, and you've had Kofi Kingston as the WWE Champion ever since. Now, I think he's been a credible WWE Champion, and certainly more recently, where he has defended his championship successfully against Daniel Bryan in Daniel Bryan's kind of return match from supposed injury, alleged concussion. We don't really know too much about that. And he has been really good on the mic, really good in the ring. He is kind of holding his own as WWE Champion, and I think he seems to be growing with confidence and growing in kind of many people's kind of lists. Or he's certainly performing well as a WWE Champion. Kevin Owens, he's not really done much, has he? To be honest with you, he was part of New Day for 1 week, and then he turned his back and attacked Kofi Kingston. Oh, I don't know. He hasn't really done anything to excite me, to be honest with you. Yes, he's hit a few power bombs, ring apron power bombs on Xavier Woods and one or two others. Kofi Kingston. Not that really kind of bled into the storyline the following week. I don't think they really acknowledged that too much. I want to see Kofi retain here. I think Kofi Kingston is going to retain and leave the arena after the pay-per-view on Sunday as the WWE Champion. So, the only matches we haven't spoke about are the 2 Money in the Bank matches. So, the women's Money in the Bank ladder match. Let's go through the participants. So, you've got Natalya, Dana Brooke, Naomi. No more Alexa Bliss. She's been pulled due to injury. She's not had a good run with injuries over the last year or so. But she's out of the match, and she's been replaced by Nikki Cross, Bayley, Mandy Rose, Ember Moon, and Carmella. So Carmella is a previous Money in the Bank champion. You could say 2-time champion, but we'll give credit to James Ellsworth for one of those. I like Ember Moon. I like Mandy Rose. Bayley, I think he has just gone non-existent. Nikki Cross, she's getting a bit of a push now. Naomi, it bores me to tears, to be honest with you. Dana Brooke, really happy she's getting a push. As I mentioned in the opening segment regarding WWE Creative, there's been lots of stop-start pushes for Dana Brooke, lots of good ideas that haven't come to fruition, but I like Dana Brooke. And Natalya, please no. So the ones that I like, I wouldn't mind seeing win. I wouldn't mind seeing Dana Brooke win. Wouldn't mind seeing Nikki Cross win. Wouldn't mind seeing Mandy Rose or Ember Moon. So there's 4. I quite like Carmella, but she's come on a little bit as a wrestler. Bayley, just not her time. I think the petals have definitely fallen off the rose there. Naomi, Natalya, no, yesterday's news. So I'm going to say Mandy Rose. Now I've predicted Mandy Rose for wins in the past, and either the matches haven't happened or she hasn't won. But certainly in a match against Asuka, I kind of predicted that she was going to be the SmackDown Women's Champion. That would have been at Fastlane, I think, and that was a bit of a screwy finish. Yeah, Mandy Rose, and I think that she's going to have some help from Sonya Deville on the outside. So I'm going to go with Mandy Rose for the women's Money in the Bank ladder match. The men's ladder match, you got Sami Zayn, Ricochet, Drew McIntyre, Baron Corbin, Mustafa Ali, Finn Balor, Andrade, Randy Orton. So a really good lineup. Yeah, it's got Baron Corbin in there, but you know, at least he's going to get a reaction from the crowd. Yeah, a really good lineup. Quite a solid Money in the Bank lineup. I think what Sami Zayn's been doing since his return on Raw has been golden. Really like Ricochet. Think that there's going to be lots of really cool high spots off of the ladder from Ricochet. Drew McIntyre, big stud in the ring there. He's going to really throw his opponents around. Much the same as Baron Corbin, I can see him doing a lot of power moves, throwing the opponents around. Ali, would love to see him win it. Not sure if he will, but I think he's in there for the high spots. Finn Balor, the current Intercontinental Champion. Not that you would really remember that if you were kind of given more than or less than 30 seconds to think about it before you realise that yes, he was still the IC Champion. Andrade, he's a wrestler that really excites me. Love to see him get a decent push. Randy Orton. I do like heel Randy Orton, but let's see who Sami Zayn. No, I can't see him, being a contender for the Universal Championship anytime soon. Same for Ricochet. I think Ricochet might be more suited to maybe the Intercontinental Championship to start off with, but Drew McIntyre possibly. Baron Corbin, I know he's getting a push, if nothing else, just to piss the fans off. So I think it's between Finn Balor, Andrade, Drew McIntyre, Baron Corbin, those four. And out of those four, I think it's going to be either Drew or Andrade. Now they're on separate brands, so if Drew wins, then he's going to be the number one contender, or he's going to have the briefcase. But then the winner of the briefcase can cash in on any brand, right? Yeah, so that could be pretty cool. I think I'm going to go with Drew McIntyre. I think he's in there for a purpose, and he's in there to win the briefcase, and I think he deserves it. He looks great. Probably one of the best promo guys in the company at the moment. Yeah, he's got the look, he's got the size, he's got the moves. Pretty much the total package. Shouldn't have lost to Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. Yeah. Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre is going to win the Money in the Bank. So there we go. I think I've covered all the matches there. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree? Let me know. And of course, we're running polls all weekend long in the run-up to the Money in the Bank pay-per-view to see who you think will win some of the key matches on the show. I think it should be a hell of a show. Some really good matches there. Going to be intrigued to see how Becky Lynch performs in her 2 championship matches. I think she's losing one and winning one. Really kind of hot main event match between Seth Rollins and AJ Styles. I think the 2 ladder matches should be great. The Miz versus Shane in a steel cage should be pretty good. Kofi versus Kevin Owens should be pretty good. Looking forward to the tag match between Daniel Bryan and Rowan versus the Usos. Still can't believe that's going to be on the pre-show. Should be a solid show. They're going to have to, pull out a good performance so that people are remembering this pay-per-view over Double or Nothing next week. Because there's going to be people comparing the 2 shows, and if Double or Nothing is awesome, which a lot of people are expecting it to be, then WWE are going to want to say, yeah, but look at our show from last weekend. Yeah, so there you go. That's the end of this episode of Wrestling with Johners. I really hope that you've enjoyed it. We'll be back again on either Thursday or Friday of next week, where we will be covering NXT and NXT UK as per usual. We will also be doing a full rundown of the AEW's Double or Nothing card from Las Vegas. We'll be kind of breaking down all the matches, talking about the individuals, getting you more familiar with the superstars that will be taking part in that epic historic match, Double or Nothing, that will be taking place next Saturday, the 25th, and we'll be covering Double or Nothing the following week in a special Double or Nothing review show. But next week's standard episode of Wrestling with Johners will cover a preview and a prediction episode of Double or Nothing. See if we can get a few Wrestling with Johners listeners to join in on that, to kind of add their thoughts and feelings on the participants and some of the matches for Double or Nothing. For today, for tonight, for this show, thank you very much. That is pretty much a wrap. So I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. If you did, please don't forget to hit subscribe and shout about this podcast. Subscribe, shout, please. Tell your friends, tell your family, and keep listening to Wrestling with Johners for all of your weekly NXT UK, NXT, WWE, and AEW updates, and pretty much whatever we want to kind of review. We cover a lot on this show. We do cover a lot of different promotions. Last week we was covering Progress. And we've covered various promotions on here before. But yes, Money in the Bank this weekend. Hope you really, really enjoy it. Let us know what you think about this episode in the comments. Don't forget to follow, like, subscribe. We'll be back, as I said, later on this week for another episode covering everything that's good about NXT and NXT UK and our AEW Double or Nothing predictions. But in the meantime, take care, have yourself a good week, and speak to you all soon.